What's going on, everybody? It's Tej back again with another video, and today I'm going to be dishing out some breakout candidates for all 32 NFL teams. Tried to keep myself to just one name per team, but we did cheat a little bit here and there. So we've got about 45 names or so to talk about in today's video. Really excited to talk about these guys who I think are on the verge of taking that next step forward in their careers. Also want to say happy late Independence Day, 4th of July to those who celebrate. I just came back from the beach, feeling reinvigorated, and hopefully you are enjoying your summer and feeling the same way. Either you're coming off vacation or you got one on the horizon soon. I hope you do enjoy it. And then also want to note, on the horizon, I'm going to be doing a most underrated player on each and every NFL team. So a very similar video to something like this. And then I'm thinking about doing something fantasy football related. So let me know if you'd be interested in this. But potential sleeper, like a deep late round sleeper for each and every team. I think that'd be a really fun idea. And hey, it's the offseason. We're looking to fill up some content windows, right, with some new and interesting stuff. Also, hopefully going to have some division previews out here in the next couple of weeks. And of course, draft content, all that sort of fun stuff. So like, comment, subscribe. Definitely comment, though. Like, that's the most important thing you can do. Let me hear who you think the breakout candidate for your team is going to be in 2024-25. I'd love to hear who you think is going to be that breakout star for your squad. But let's start with the AFC East. The Bills were tough. I could have gone Dalton Kincaid. I could have gone Khalil Shakir. Decided to go Shakir. He just had a little bit higher of a percentage of snaps played out wide. I think Keon Coleman's going to take on that X role, so I could totally see where Shakir's kind of playing that other outside spot, but off the line of scrimmage, while also still using him in the slot. But you're also going to use Kincaid there. Curtis Samuel can be utilized there too. So it's a whole team full of these slot receivers. But man, really liked what I saw from Khalil Shakir down the stretch last season, and specifically with the move to Joe Brady as the OC. Felt like this team wanted to attack the middle of the field and win with yards after the catch opportunities, and I think Khalil Shakir totally fits that, while still having an abundance of speed. And again, I think a little bit more flexibility to play out wide. It's going to be interesting to see the usage for Kincaid if you want to go with him as your Bills breakout guy. I totally get that. It's going to be interesting to see who ends up playing a little bit more outside, Shakir versus Kincaid, and who ends up being the primary slot guy in addition to Curtis Samuel. The Dolphins, Zach Sealer, I mean, even beyond his Dolphins, his career, or when he got to Miami at least, just been a rock solid football player, solid pass rusher, really nice run defender, and you can see he's high-fiving Christian Wilkins in this picture, so pretty clear why I had him be the breakout candidate. It's an interior defensive line that is looking for some lost production, some guys to step up and fill that void, which is going to be tough. There's not going to be a guy who does it one-to-one, I don't think, but you bring in a Calais Campbell, and I think this is just going to be the year with all those eyes now on Miami's interior defensive line. Man, we lost Christian Wilkins. Who's going to step up? I think if Zach Sealer just kind of maintains status quo, just does it with a few more snaps this upcoming season, it's going to be pretty clear, like, hey, this guy helped soften the blow of losing a Christian Wilkins a ton. And then you have Calais Campbell and some other guys in the mix that are hopefully filling in with the aggregate, and that total kind of adds up to Christian Wilkins. But Zach Sealer, another, honestly, if we're talking most underrated, like, he's another guy I could definitely put on that list for the Miami Dolphins. Patriots, I'm going to go Pop Douglas here, Demario Douglas. I think they drafted a couple of high floor receivers that I liked a ton, Javon Baker and Jalen Polk. But that being said, Demario Douglas is the one guy of that three that actually has NFL experience. And I also think back to Drake May 2 years ago, back when he actually had a couple of weapons on that UNC offense. A lot of Josh Downs usage there. Albeit, Josh Downs clearly the best receiver on that UNC team, so you feed your best players, and Downs was working from the slot. But I still think there could be some usage and some similarities where, especially early on, May is really leaning on that guy with, albeit 1 year of NFL experience, but the guy who has played in the league and can do it from the slot. And I think his skill set too just really fits nicely with, prototypical slot receiver. Pats just drafted two outside guys. Pop Douglas then finds his home truly on the inside. Love the yards after the catch stuff. Really shifty route runner. I think a guy that you can just make the game easy for Drake May. If things start to get too complicated, just get it to Pop Douglas and let him do some cool stuff. I think it's a really nice fit, and I think he's going to be a guy that the Pats lean on pretty heavily, as well as Drake May in specific. The Jets here is our first inclusion of two names here, and I tried to limit myself here, but a couple of edge rushers for the Jets. I think this kind of Hassan Reddick, Bryce Huff situation probably going to end up being a bit of a wash. Reddick's probably stepping into that Huff role. But Jermaine Johnson last year actually had a really solid season. Not on like a full 1,000 snaps or anything like that, but solid snap share and really solid production both as a pass rusher and as a run defender. So I'm just looking for him to kind of piggyback on that in year 3, maybe even with a slightly bigger role. And typically I'm speaking in general here. I'm not trying to, specific and make this like hard and fact and rule or anything like that. But typically, I feel like my more casual NFL friends are about a year behind. When you start to notice, like Jermaine Johnson, I feel like there's a lot of buzz around him because year 2 was really solid. He's playing for a good defense and a good defensive line. He's in a good rotation, got a good head coach, yeah, all that sort of stuff. So I feel like nitty gritty NFL fans that are talking about NFL at this point of the year, they're like, yeah, Jermaine Johnson's a good player, and I think year 3 is gonna be a big one. I feel like your more casual NFL fans are gonna be like stepping into year 3, be like, oh, who's that guy? The number 11 for the Jets is a damn good football player, and it's like, yeah, he was like that way too. You just the Jets weren't really worth watching, and obviously the Jets figure to be one of the best teams in the AFC as long as Rodgers stays healthy. So a lot of spotlight on that team in general, a lot of spotlights on that defense, and Jermaine Johnson, I think, plays a big part of that. And then I put Will McDonald in there as well. Again, you do lose Bryce Huff, so it's going to be interesting to see how the snap share kind of totally works out. Also, you move on from John Franklin Myers this offseason. So Will McDonald, I figured to see a bigger role for him this year, and I liked him a ton. A little bit of a surprise that they took him at 15, but at the same time, Robert Saleh kind of feels like a guy that he fits with what Saleh wants to do, and him as well as the Jets GM have always kind of prioritized loading up the trenches, O-line and D-line. So not ultimately super surprising when you take those trends into account, but now this is going to be his year. Hopefully year 2 we see a bigger role for him, and we get to see specifically in pass rush situations what he can do and what he can bring to the table for the Jets. So larger role. I'm kind of buying into my draft analysis and what I thought Will McDonald was coming out of Iowa State. I liked him a good bit, and I think Jermaine Johnson is just going to pick up where he left off last year. Houston Texans, I'm going to go with Azeez Al-Shaair. I was a little surprised he didn't sign with Houston an offseason ago. Not very surprised that he signed with Houston this offseason. And I mean, I think Blake Cashman is actually kind of finding his place in the NFL. I think he'll be a good player for the Vikings, but no coincidence to me that his career breakout coincided with his year working with DeMeco Ryans. I think Azeez Al-Shaair, through this point in his career, has been a better player than Blake Cashman, with maybe last year being the exception. But now you plug in Azeez Al-Shaair into that DeMeco Ryans defense, and don't forget, Navarro Bowman as their linebackers coach. That's an awesome plus as well. So I think Azeez Al-Shaair, already a good player, was kind of under the radar there in San Francisco because he was LB3. Titans disappoint, and now I think he's stepping into a defense that he's familiar with DeMeco Ryans, and Ryans is going to coach him up as well as Navarro Bowman. I think this is the year where Azeez Al-Shaair probably gets that Pro Bowl nod of the AFC. Colts, EJ Speed. Didn't play, I think it was less than 800 snaps last year, but from what I saw, I liked it a good bit. Good athlete, can do a lot of different things. Solid run defender with also good coverage feel. And obviously this is kind of a linebacking core that's kind of gone through an overhaul. If you told me 3 years ago that, the artist formerly known as Darius Leonard, now Shaq Leonard, wasn't going to be a Colt, I'd be like, whoa, what happened? 3 or 4 years ago, it'd be a major shock. But they've kind of retooled that position. I think EJ Speed, Zaire Franklin, both guys I had in consideration here, but PFF grades for EJ Speed a little bit higher and on a smaller sample size. So I think he's kind of prototypical breakout player. We've liked what we've seen so far, and now I think the role is going to get that much larger for Speed going into this season. The Jags, I'm going to go with Antonio Johnson, guy I liked a ton coming out of A&M. Was super surprised he fell to the 5th round of the Jags. Started to get some more significant playing time through the last 3 weeks of the regular season, and now you move on from Rayshawn Jenkins. I think Antonio Johnson's a perfect nickel. That's really what I wanted him to be coming into the league out of A&M, be this strong safety, nickel corner hybrid. I had him right behind Brian Branch in that draft. I saw them kind of similar. I saw Antonio Johnson's a bigger but lesser version of Brian Branch. And now I think he's got the chance this season to showcase what he can do as that box safety, nickel corner hybrid. They also have Darnell Savage, who could do a little bit of both those things, but I'd rather see Antonio Johnson get the nod there in the nickel. And again, leaning on my draft priors, that's going to be a big part of this video. I like Johnson a ton. I think now he's got the role to showcase what he brings to the table. And then Titans, Will Levis, a couple of, the quarterbacks here, some are obvious, right? Levis isn't a first rounder, but this whole offseason was focused on, okay, we're going to bring in the Bengals OC. He's going to bring in his dad, who's maybe the best offensive line coach, probably the best offensive line coach in the NFL, which we desperately need. We're going to spend a first rounder at tackle. We're going to sign a receiver. We're going to sign 2 receivers for that matter. This offseason was about, and I mean, they retooled things on the defensive side too. L'Jarius Sneed, Chidobe Awuzie, don't get me wrong there, but those 2 corner moves and then build around Will Levis. Give him a stable supporting environment. So I was a big Will Levis fan coming out of that draft. He was my QB2. Big Will Levis guy. I think he showed some flashes. He also showed some of those things that, other people didn't like about him throughout the draft process, but I think it was an imperfect situation. He's a rookie quarterback. I'm hoping now situation's improved. He's improved. Year 2 is a big one for Will Levis. All right, AFC West. I'm going to go with Josh Reynolds. So a lot of these guys are going to be like, they're going in their second year. They're going in their third year. This is the time, Josh Josh Reynolds has been in the league for a long time, man. But at the same time, he's just a jack of all trades, really savvy receiver, can win at all three levels, enough speed to challenge over the top while, sharp enough route runner to win in the intermediates. I know he has the infamous, fourth down drop. I think a little bit more of that should probably fall on the shoulders of Jared Goff, in my opinion. But nevertheless, the Lions draw that play up for him because he has the lowest drop percentage of any Lions receiver last season, but also the lowest drop rate of any Lions receiver on that roster through their career. So, sure-handed, very reliable. And I think that's something that's going to really fit with Bo Nix, Sean Payton attacking that underneath. I could totally see, not to call him Michael Thomas, but could see a world where he ends up kind of playing that role while also having the ability to stretch the field and be a deep threat over the top. And a lot of this is going to come down to Courtland Sutton. Will they, won't they trade him by trading camp? Tim Patrick, is he going to stay on the field this season? Like him a ton when he's out there, but 2 years in a row now. So a lot of question marks there. Receiver also like Marvin Mims, a couple big plays. His role seemingly shrinks after that. Super weird. So a lot of things to be figured out in that receiver room. And because of that, I like the stability and the high floor that Josh Reynolds plays. And if you told me at the end of the year he's the Broncos' leading receiver, I'm not entirely sure I'll be shocked. And if you told me he gets a Pro Bowl nod, I'm not entirely sure I'll be shocked. And again, some of that will come down to injuries and who's on the roster by the end of the season for the Denver Broncos. Chiefs, George Karlaftis, obvious one, former first-round pick, high motor. Felix Anudike-Uzomah could have definitely been in this as well. Both are benefiting from a Charles Omenihu injury late in the playoffs last year. Karlaftis just a little bit further on in his career. And I think year two was a step up from year one. A lot of power, high motor, and I think he's figuring it out from a move standpoint and hand placement's cleaning up. So this one's one of the more clean ones. You could have gone with Karlaftis or FAU. I like them both a good bit. I like Karlaftis a little bit more, though. So I am leaning towards him also a little bit further along in his NFL development. And with Omenihu missing a significant portion of the season, the Chiefs are definitely leaning on Karlaftis, needing him to take a step forward this season. Chargers, Zion Johnson, former first-round pick, so all that's, kind of like, good talent. First 2 years haven't been bad, haven't been great. PFF grades in the low to mid-60s, so okay. But offensive linemen tend to be a little bit slower in that development curve, right? Year 3, year 4, that's when you want to see him pick it up. And we're going into year 3 of Zion Johnson, so naturally, career arc-wise, I think we're at that time where we should start to see it. But I also think in this, Jim Harbaugh, we want to establish the run. Greg Roman, let's go gap scheme. I think he's a hell of a fit for all that. And I think by leaning on the run a little bit more, where this Chargers team, especially last year, they weren't very good, playing from behind a lot. I think Zion Johnson is a capable pass protector, but if this becomes a run-first offense, they're dropping back 20, 25 times and leaning on the run a little bit more and using that gap. And Greg Roman can draw up a number of different, run schemes, man. Like, that man's a wizard at it. So I think that run game is going to be a whole lot better in LA. I think Zion Johnson's going to be a big part of that. And also, I think, again, year 3, this is about the time we want to see him take that step forward as that former first rounder. Raiders, very different, offensive line guy to talk about here in Thayer Mumford, but look at the PFF grades, and albeit a small sample size last year. He's pretty solid, man. And he was a guy from Ohio State that, probably a little overshined by some of the other guys in that draft, right? Like a Paris Johnson Jr., who's a much better athlete. But there, Mumford, big, athletic. I mean, not super athletic, but, for his size, not a bad athlete at the same time, who wins with a ton of length. And you kind of saw that when he stepped in and was a starter last year for the Raiders. So now moving out to right tackle, big shoes to fill. I mean, relatively big shoes to fill. Jermaine Illuminor had been a solid player. So there is some unknown quantity that comes with Mumford now being the starter at right tackle, but all that said, I like what I saw last year. Sliding over to right tackle makes sense. Year 3, this is all kind of lining up for me to where I could see, Thayer Mumford, he's a day 3 pick, but he ends up being a starter. And I also think, with what Antonio Pierce wants to do, I think Thayer Mumford is going to be a good fit for that, right? They're going to try to establish the run, win with defense, and I think that benefits Thayer Mumford that much more. I think he's in a good spot to be a really solid replacement to Illuminor, and then probably their future right tackle, at least for the next handful of seasons. And then hopefully, if he builds on what he did last year, it'll be a nice 1-2 punch with him and Colton Miller on the other side for the Raiders. Then we get to the AFC North. Andrew Voorhees for the Ravens, leading on draft prior here. I thought he was an extremely high floor guy. May not have the craziest ceiling, but a WYSIWYG prospect, right? What you see is what you get. And I liked what I saw at USC, and I wanted to, get that. I wanted more of that. And then obviously he has the ACL injury at the combine that, takes away his rookie year. But now, our lad's projected starter at left guard. To me, that makes a ton of sense. Where he played in college, he fits with what they have typically wanted to do out of their guards. And honestly, I liked him as a prospect more than I liked Ben Cleveland. So yeah, I think Andrew Voorhees is a really nice starter for them, and he's just kind of this guy who fell down the draft board because of a late injury, and then you didn't see from him his rookie year, so he feels like a forgotten commodity. And I think he's just going to step in and be a really solid starter. I'm not saying he's going to be all world, but I think he's just going to be a rock steady starter. And by the end of the season, it's going to be like, dude, who's this? How do the Ravens do that? Who's that guy at left guard that's just like pretty good? And guys who like to come out of USC are going to be kind of taking a victory lap, and hopefully that's me by the end of the year. But I think I really, as much as there could be issues on that interior offensive line, maybe I'll be wrong, but like I look at Voorhees, Linderbaum, and then Ben Cleveland, Patrick McCarry, one of those guys starting at right guard. Feeling good about that interior if I'm the Ravens. Then we get to the Bengals. I'll go Myles Murphy. Man, not the biggest sample size, but of the edge rushers that were drafted in the 2023 draft, Myles Murphy kind of feels like the guy in the mid to late first round portion that when I actually went back and looked at it, he most matched his pre-draft comp, and that's a little silly to say, and it feels a little odd to say, but I feel like some of those other guys in that class are still trying to figure out how they're going to win at the NFL level, while Myles Murphy kind of like coming out of college, I feel like he just knew what he was and then understands he needs to be coached up. But when you watch him last year for the Bengals, again, small sample size, but you see first step explosiveness, which obviously showed a ton of that at Clemson, and you see a ton of power, like speed of power there, natural power there, and then just like quicks throughout the rest of the play. High-end athlete with a ton of strength. Okay, cool. And it felt like down the rest of those season too, you start to see the hand placement get a little bit better. This offseason hopefully has been spent trying to coach up and get him a move or two, right? Because if this guy gets a couple of moves on top of what he's bringing from power speed standpoint, there's a good shot where Myles Murphy's better than Sam Hubbard this year. And that's the other thing. That's the other thing that kind of makes this video like, where is their opportunity to be a breakout candidate? And I know Sam Hubbard's been a Bengals fan favorite, and rightfully so, and he's not a bad player. He's fine. But if Myles Murphy emerges and he's better, and then Sam Hubbard's your third guy, especially as someone that you maybe use on early downs because he's a solid run defender, I feel way better about that situation versus Hubbard, and then you're hoping Murphy figures it out. So I'm hoping this is the year where Murphy kind of breaks it out. I'm hoping this offseason's been well spent trying to coach him up from a pass rush standpoint. He kind of flashed with the speed, the power, the things that we kind of knew he would bring to the table out of Clemson. He did that. It played at the NFL level. Just got to get coached up from a move standpoint. And I think that got better down the stretch last year too. So Myles Murphy, I think, on the up and up. Browns, I'll stick with Jerry Jeudy. Same picture I used in the last video here on the channel. But is anybody not disappointed with Jerry Jeudy at this point in his career? Right? Like, I think everyone's a little frustrated because that top three receivers in that class, that was kind of like the return of the receiver position, right? That was like one of the first classes where it's like, all right, this top three, these guys are bona fide first round studs, right? Like him, Henry Ruggs, and CD. And one's turned into a superstar, one's out of the league, and then Jerry Jeudy kind of TBD right now. But I said this in the last video too, like, I know Deshaun Watson has a ton of question marks right now, and he hasn't necessarily played great, and he hasn't lived up to the money that Cleveland's given him. But he's better than Denver Joe Flacco. He's better than Case Keenum. He's better than Russell Wilson. And he's better than Jarrett Stidham down the stretch last year. This is the best quarterback situation that Jerry Jeudy's had. So this is the time to make it happen. Also, he's like in an offense where he's clearly the number two. Like, Amari Cooper's the best receiver in that room. So naturally, he's going to get more attention. Also, David Njoku's a beast and kind of emerging as one of the best tight ends in the league. So Jeudy maybe honestly be their third target. And it's already a team that wants to run the ball too, right? Like, assuming Nick Chubb comes back at 100%. So I feel like all that kind of takes some pressure off of Jeudy, and I'm hoping this is the year where, okay, better quarterback play. We're not asking you to be the savior of this offense. Just go out there and trust yourself, and then hopefully we'll get to see Jerry Jeudy that he was at Alabama. And then I wonder what that would mean for the Browns on the line. Is the eventual Amari Cooper replacement? That'd be kind of interesting. But obviously, this will start this year. Need to have a breakout season for Jerry Jeudy. Steelers, George Pickens. This one's pretty obvious. A handful of guys I could have gone with here, but as of now, he's clearly the Steelers' number one receiver, right? Also, I think with his ball skills and ball tracking ability and field stretching ability in general, if Russell Wilson's a starter, I could totally see a world where those moon balls do land more often than not in the hands of George Pickens. Again, I think he's one of the best ball trackers in the NFL. I mean, across the board. Like, the man's special there. And we even saw down the stretch, like, once the Steelers moved on from Matt Canada, you can use him over the middle of the field. Steelers in general, like, you can attack the middle of the field. It's a good place to attack. Best offense in the league, attack the middle of the field. But George Pickens is capable of doing that same exact thing. First play against the Bengals, slant, gone for 80 yards. Like, he's a good enough athlete to where you want to do some of that as well. So I think the change in OC obviously gives Pickens a huge leg up to have that breakout season. And I'd argue nothing against Kenny Pickett, but as much as I don't like Russell Wilson, that's probably a little bit of an upgrade. At least from what we've seen, Pickett got a tough card having to deal with Matt Canada his 2 years in Pittsburgh. It's kind of a crime that we didn't give him at least a shot under a different OC. But nevertheless, I think it's improved OC situation. I think it's better quarterback situation, whether it's Russ, and I definitely think it's a better QB situation. If it's Justin Fields, it'll just come down to those two getting some chemistry. Like, hopefully, if Fields is my team starter, hopefully he gets that chemistry with Pickens like he had with DJ Moore last year. All right, let's get on to the NFC side of this video. Cowboys, this was kind of a tough team. Like, I feel like they have defined stars, right? Like, CeeDee Lamb, stud. Micah Parsons, stud, right? Like, Deron Bland's coming off a record-breaking season. Not a breakout candidate, So I went with Jalen Tolbert because there's a need at that receiver room where, like, Brandon Cooks, deep threat. CD does a lot of the slot, can play out wide, but he's going to jack of all trades. We're going to ask him to do everything. He's going to be the heartbeat of this offense, really. But who's that contested catch guy? And that's not to say CeeDee Lamb can't, but, like, just a little bit more, at least one more guy who could do that. I think Jalen Tolbert's the best bet. That's kind of who he was coming out of South Alabama, and that's part of why I liked him. And they made the decision to move on from Michael Gallup. Jalen Tolbert to me was, very very as a draft prospect, and made a lot of sense that they then drafted Tolbert, and now they've moved on from Gallup. To me, it's pretty clear he's going to step into those shoes, and now hopefully he steps up and plays better than Michael Gallup did last year. But they're just kind of looking for that high point guy. Again, Lamb does everything. Cooks is a deep threat. One more guy to go make those tough 50-50 ball catches. I think Jalen Tolbert could be that guy. Giants 2 here, John Michael Schmidt and Deontay Banks. I'll start with Banks here because he's not the guy in the picture. The PFF grades are rough, but I feel like he's in position more often than not. It's just the same crux he had at Maryland where he's there, he's in the play, he's sticky in coverage, but if the ball's thrown anyway, the ball skills are still TBD. And it's both like late turning his head, it's late getting his hands up. It's like the technique of how he plays the receiver as they go up and get it. So a lot of things that still need to be cleaned up from like playing the ball, playing the receiver in the air, that sort of stuff. Like, two dogs go up for one bone. Like, he needs to be better in that situation. He needs to stop losing those spots. But nevertheless, I think he was sticky in coverage, and I love the size and the speed. So I'm going to think Banks is going to figure that out. But John Michael Schmidt, man, the reason I'm kind of buying into this is like, one, Raiders offensive line coach comes over to the Giants. We saw the magic that he did with Jermaine Olumenor, but also like Andre James was a massive disappointment his first year as a starter for the Raiders. He just was. And that was, pre that offensive line coach being there. And it's also right after Rodney Hudson, called it quits and stopped being a Raider. So one, it's like following up one of the best pass protecting centers of the last, 20 years, but also until that offensive line coach got there, he was a disappointment. And then, he's coming off now a year where he just earned another, 3-year extension. Some of that credit has to go to the offensive line coach. So now that he's now there in New York, I also think John Michael Schmidt liked him way more as a prospect than I did Andre James. I think he's just a better football player. So I think with the right coaching, things are going to get on track here. And also this team made investments across the offensive line. All right, you bring in Sean Ryan. You bring in Jermaine Olumenor. Maybe that moves Evan Neal inside. We'll see TBD there. I know seen some conflicting things there. But nevertheless, it feels like the rest of that interior offensive line is going to get better this year for the Giants, which should in turn make the job that much easier for John Michael Schmidt. Eagles, this was my laundry list team because they got a lot of dudes who need to step up, right? Because you have Travis Kelce, Jason Kelce retire, as well as Fletcher Cox. So naturally, lots of opportunity to be had there for a breakout candidate. Cam Jurgens is the guy that Jason Kelce said, draft that guy, he's the replacement for me. So, to me, clear-cut, I had to have him on this list. I had to have him on this list because I'm not saying he'll be a future Hall of Famer Jason Kelce good, but I think he'll soften that blow pretty substantially. And the fact that Kelce wanted the Eagles to draft him, and he's been starting in a good starter at guard, and he's been working with Kelce, I think that's going to soften the blow a ton. And then Tyler Steen, to me, was okay tackle prospect, but better guard, and then the Eagles he just kind of fell into their lap, and I'm like, oh shoot, the guy that could be a starter in a pinch for Lane Johnson if you really needed to, or he could just be a right guard. Yeah, okay, cool. He's a projected starter at right guard right now. I think he's gonna be a rock solid one, and it's gonna be another conversation where just like the Andrew Voorhees thing, where it's like, damn, how did the Eagles do that? Who's this guy? I've never heard of Steen. Your casual fans would say that. Who's Steen? Who's this guy? I've never heard of him playing a right guard. Oh, well, he's rock solid, man. The Eagle way. And then on the defensive side, the Georgia guys. I'm mostly talking about Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis here. I am questioning how big of a role Nolan Smith's going to have, but it should be a bigger role, right? But, Reddick for Huff, that feels like a one-for-one swap. So we'll see. You got Brandon Graham back for another year. So I'm hoping Nolan Smith takes a step forward this year. We just didn't get to see a whole lot of him last year. But now's the time, right? 2 drafts ago, you select Jalen Carter in the first round. 3 drafts ago, you draft Jordan Davis. Okay, now's the time. So, teammates in college, insane duo in that national championship, the first of 2 back-to-back championships at Georgia. Now we need to see at the NFL level. And to start last year, dude, Jalen Carter began his career almost on an Aaron Donald level of play, which is crazy. And then I think over the course of the year, he didn't play a whole lot of snaps at Georgia, and I think maybe as the year wore on, that started to, play a factor on him. And if that's the case, okay, hopefully year 2, that conditioning is a little bit better and they can lean on him for more snaps. And then Jordan Davis, I think there's generally been some good stuff, but also not a large sample size. That's got to change this year. And they have some other dudes they can lean on, like a Milton Williams to play on the inside. So I'm not expecting these guys to lead the NFL in interior defensive line snaps or anything like that, but they need to they need to have a much bigger snap share or snap percentage than they did a year ago. And also they need to live up to a guy drafted at 9 overall and a guy who drafted at 13 overall, both of which, mind you, the Eagles traded up to get. Only one spot for both of them, but they traded up to get both these guys. So they need to live up to it. I think all the talent in the world there, specifically with Jalen Carter. Now it's just the opportunity's there. Can you live up to it? Commanders, this was a tough one, man. I started with Sam Cosmi, but to me, he's already a really good football player. He's got 3 years of great tape, in my opinion. To me, he's the most stable thing on that offensive line. So not really a breakout. Just nobody knows about him because the Commanders' offensive line was ridiculed last year. And I think Cosmi was the only good link. But Benjamin St. Juste is tough because 6'3", 200, loved the size, liked the tape, liked him as a prospect coming out of Minnesota. But the NFL has been disappointing. But that being said, he spent his entire career in the Rivera Del Rio regime where year over year it looks like a good defense on paper and then they fall short of expectation. And to me, that's all coaching. That's 100%. I'm a Yankees fan for baseball. How many years can you talk about a team with certain expectations, high bar, and them continue to fall short of it before you decide to make a move? Well, the Commanders have done something that the Yankees just seemingly won't do, and they've decided, hey, that's not good enough, okay? We're tired of being talked about as a great defense, and I'm not seeing it on the field. So obviously that's ownership too playing a factor, but I think Dan Quinn can get some better play out of him. It's going to be interesting to see, the man coverage splits, quarters, cover 3, what Dan Quinn wants to do. He's been willing to change his defense. What does he do in Washington? That's going to be fascinating in and of itself. And I wish Al Harris would have come with him to Washington, but the Cowboys matched that shit. So what ain't going to happen? If Al Harris is there, I'm definitely buying into Benjamin St. Juste. But I think Dan Quinn's going to be able to work some magic. And I'm not saying St. Juste can be an all-pro guy. Definitely not saying that. Or maybe not even Pro Bowl guy. But can he have the best year of his career? I certainly hope so. And I certainly think Dan Quinn can get that out of him. And then also hopefully the offense is better, right? And, keeping the defense on the sideline a little bit longer. There's nothing worse than a tired defense going out there and you could tell, right? And there were times last year where you could tell Washington's defense was gassed and then points were just being poured on the board against them. So I'm hoping everything across the board improves the situation for St. Juste. Again, I liked him at Minnesota. Also, we're going into year 4. Last year was contract. Sometimes you just get that random, last year of a contract, dude plays out of his mind. And I don't know what that looks like for St. Juste, but hopefully it's a career year. And maybe we get that PFF grade somewhere in the mid-70s. I think that would be a huge step forward for a team that needs some boost in the secondary play. All right, NFC South time. Let's start with the Falcons. Easy one here. Kyle Pitts and Drake London. Two guys that I think are awesome fits in a Sean McVay disciple offense, which is what they have with Zach Robinson taking over as the OC. But also, one guy drafted in the top 5, one guy drafted in the top 10. The talent's there. Freak shows as prospects, specifically Pitts. Tight ends are just not normally built that way. But Drake London was a guy I liked a ton. I had 3 receivers that year as tier 1, future number 1 guys. One's Garrett Wilson. I think he's lived up to that. I think we've seen enough from London to believe he's there, and then we'll talk about the other guy. And I think the next slide. If not the next one, the very last one. Actually, it's the very last one. Sorry. But yeah, now, and also the other thing holding back both these guys is QB play. No disrespect to Desmond Ridder, but it just wasn't enough. And no disrespect to Taylor Heineke, but it's just not enough. Kirk Cousins, Michael Penix, all right, let's go. So, no excuse from QB play, no excuse from scheme. These guys have the talent. This is the year where they finally put it together. And I think everyone's expecting it because you look at where they're being drafted right now in fantasy, and obviously early on in that process, but it's everyone's expecting these two to freak out, have a breakout year and kind of turn that on, put the offense on their shoulders. So, I'm not really saying anything that you haven't thought it yourself. Panthers, Bryce Young, obvious one. He's on the thumbnail for a reason. Former number 1 overall pick. Dave Canales' back-to-back years, reinvigorating Geno, reinvigorating Baker. Now it's Bryce Young's turn, and kind of like the Will Levis thing earlier, they spent so much of this offseason focused on improving his situation. 2 guards are going to improve the pass protection a ton. For a short quarterback, you need a clean interior. Damian Lewis, Robert Hunt, checks that box. You trade for a number 1 receiver. You fleece the Steelers. I say number 1 receiver. You fleece the Steelers and get Deontay Johnson, who, when acquired, is clearly their most talented receiver. And then you go and draft a guy in the first round, Xavier Legette, who maybe has the ability to surpass Deontay Johnson and be their number 1 guy. And then also you draft Jonathan Brooks in the top 50, who felt like the consensus top running back in the class and was one of my tier 1 running backs in last year's group. So improved offensive line, Now it's going to come down to Kim Aquanu. Can he get better? I'm hoping coaching staff changes will get that out of him. But improved interior offensive line, better running back. I think Brooks, day one, easily their best starter. And then 2 receivers, one via trade, one via the NFL draft. Hard not to get excited about that. So, and then, of course, Canals himself as a play caller. So, yeah, I think everything's improved off the board for Bryce Young. And if he doesn't show it this year, you start putting up the red flags. And Dave Tepper's quick to move, so I will be super curious. If Young struggles, like, what does he do? To the Saints, a couple more receivers to talk about here. Rashid Shaheed is someone I've really talked about pretty highly on this channel. I really like the idea of him as that field stretcher, yards after the catch, almost like poor man's Jameson Williams, a little bit. Again, kind of giving away who I'm going to talk about with the Lions later on, but like kind of the under-radar version of that maybe, non-first-round version of that. But if they give him a larger sample of what the Saints started to show and he had flashes of last year for New Orleans, I think that's going to be a breakout season for Rashid Shaheed. And then A.T. Perry is the interesting one, right? Like, really intriguing size speed guy coming out of Wake. I know the 40 wasn't insane, but he's 6'5". Take into account how big this dude is. It's an impressive 40. And, at Wake, it's pretty much slants and goes. Slants and goes. That's pretty much what he did. That being said, with Chris Olave and Shaheed there, I don't necessarily need a whole lot more out of you. And there were moments last year where I'm like, damn, I didn't think A.T. Perry would see the field at all this year, and he actually looks kind of good. I think going into year 2, this is a good opportunity for A.T. Perry to be that big body physical receiver while still playing as a deep downfield threat. And now you look at this Saints team, and it's like, ooh, man, if Clint Kubiak can be anywhere near, if he can be 50% as good as Kyle Shanahan with these 3 guys who can all stretch the field with Derek Carr, man, as long as he can push the ball down the field, this could be a really fun offense. So as long as Carr doesn't get too, conservative, which sometimes he has a tendency to do, this could be a really fun team to watch and could be a big year for all 3 of those receivers. And if Carr is, kind of timid and this team starts to struggle and they make a QB change, Rattler, Kubiak, those 3 receivers, that might in itself be more fun to watch. So, I don't know, this is an interesting offense. Year over year, I find myself kind of intrigued by what New Orleans is going to look like. And the last couple of years, I've been a little bit disappointed. But now, Pete Carmichael gone, I'm ready to see where New Orleans goes. The Bucs, I'm going to go with Kalijah Kancey. Looked really good in the 2 playoff games. So he's ended last year on a really high note. The sample size of playing time before that was pretty small. But I think this year, he's going to be bad against the run. But just play him next to Vita Vea. I used this picture for a reason. Vea's a monster. He's one of the league's best run defenders when he's on. Keep Kancey close to him and just let him pin his ears back and go after the quarterback. That's what we saw in the playoffs, and that's easily where he was the biggest, most game-wrecking version of himself, including the game against the Eagles, who at the time had Jason Kelsey still. Landon Dickerson, one of the best guards in football. Juergens, a very solid guard, too. So maybe the best game he played all last year was against maybe the best interior offensive line the NFL has to offer. So that's a huge plus going into this season for Kancey. I think he's only going to get that much better in year 2. And then maybe he's added 5 to 10 pounds worth of muscle and won't be as big of a liability against the run. Because if so, then this guy needs to be playing all 3 downs for Todd Bowles. All right, AFC West, Cardinals, Paris Johnson Jr., a guy apparently they would have been willing to take at 3. They end up getting at 6. Going into year 3, this is just the time. This is the time where we want to see that leap forward for year 2. This is the time where we want to see that leap forward for Paris Johnson Jr., and he's alternated tackle spots over the last 4 years, which I found really interesting. I think he's a natural left tackle, so I'm glad to see him in his natural position. I think he's going to be I just think he's taking a step forward. He was my OT1, so again, leaning on my draft priors here, but I was a huge Paris Johnson Jr. guy, back at left tackle, love the athleticism, year of experience, another offseason of coaching. I think year 2 is when we get to see it for Paris. Rams, Camp Curl, man. I just think he's been kind of lost in the weeds because Washington's been disappointing, but he's just a really good football player. I think he's one of the league's most underrated guys. And now I think he's stepping into a way more stable situation. Talked about offense failing Washington, putting their defense back on the field, and they're gassed, clearly putting up points. Not going to have that nearly as often with Sean McVay and the Rams offense. I also think he's a great fit for a team that's going to run a lot of quarters and a lot of cover 3. He could be that cover 3 robber, or in quarters, he plays a lane. And I think he's got great coverage skill sets. He's a good enough athlete. Well, he's also a great box player and a willing tackler, too. So, like jack of all trades, I think he's a great fit for that Rams secondary and specifically that safety spot that's seen some turnover the last few years. So, him, John Johnson III, I think that's a really awesome 1-2 punch there on the back end for the Rams. San Francisco, I'm going to go Jair Brown. This is another team where I didn't really love any of the options, to be honest. I wasn't going to pick anybody from the offensive line because I wasn't going to pick a rookie, and Dominic Pooney would have been the only guy on the offensive line I maybe would have thought about. As of right now, Brandon Ayuk is still a 49er, so I can't, and I'm not going to put a rookie on here again, so I'm not going to say Pearsall. I don't really want to say Jawan Jennings because I feel like we know what he is. I don't know. This is tough. I'm not saying Leonard Floyd. I'm not saying Yatir Gross-Matos. I'm not saying Devondre Campbell. Like, this is a veteran roster, and we know who the stars are. So I'll go with Jair Brown because I really thought of him as a great Jimmy Ward replacement. When the 49ers made that pick, I was like, I think I know exactly what they're going to use him for. And we saw him kind of playing a little bit of the nickel last year, but mostly he was playing traditional safety when Talanoa Hufanga went down with an injury. And if Hufanga gets hurt again, he could totally do that. He also, I think, could still be that nickel box safety type that Jimmy Ward was. And I think he'd excel in that. So a couple of different ways this could shake out. And they also drafted Malik Mustafa, who's just a rock-solid, very dependable, high-floor guy coming out of Wake Forest. Not the world's greatest athlete, not the world's biggest guy, but just not going to blow an assignment. So I'm trying to figure out what that rotation is going to look like. But I think Jair Brown, man, if they play him in the nickel, he's going to become a name to know in that San Francisco defense. Seahawks, Jackson Smith and Jigba. I mean, Tyler Lockett's just, one day closer to that decline, and I think we're starting to see it slowly but surely. But he is headed towards the end of his career, right? Like, age catches up to all of us, especially our smaller, speedy downfield receivers. Not to say that's all Lockett does, but I think we're going to start to see that target share become a little bit more. Honestly, this could be the year where we see JSN take over as the number 2 target guy in that offense. And I think he's a great complement for DK Metcalf, who, runs that slant, but he's there to go stretch the field. JSN's a merchant, had that insane, 6'3", 7'3" count that's just like, or 6'5", 7'3" count that like boggles my mind that he could do that. But that's 3 wins, change of directions, route running, winning over the middle of the field. And he had a couple drops last year that kind of bogged down some of his stats. And I think took away from games that stat line wise could have looked better. And also I think that kind of hurt him with like a coaching staff because it's like, can't drop that, man. All right, these targets are going to go to Lockett instead, or they're going to go to, whoever. So as long as he cleans up those drops, which really weren't an issue at Ohio State, so I just feel like it's, rookie, nervousness maybe. But if he cleans that up, I think, he's going to become the number 2 target in that offense. And I think he's a really great compliment for DK Metcalf. And I think year 2 with him and Geno, nice place for them to continue to build on chemistry from last year. And the last 4 names we're going to talk about, Bears, Gervon Dexter. I really wanted them to take Byron Murphy at 9. Not that I'm mad about Rome Odunze. Don't take that as me saying Rome shouldn't have been the pick. Honestly, I wanted them to take Rome at 9, and if not him, Byron Murphy the second. Just because, all the talk last draft cycle was, Jalen Carter's the perfect 3 tech that Matt Eberflus needs. Well, Byron Murphy may not be Jalen Carter, but damn, he's not terribly far off. That to me is the perfect 3 tech in this year's draft for him. And it's another year where they passed on it. And, Gervon Dexter, I think, flashed a little bit down towards the end of the season as a pass rusher. Still consistent as a run defender, but him or Zach Pickens, one of these guys is going to have to step up. It's an interior defensive line that needs an improved pass rush presence. Andrew Billings is a fine run defender, but you need someone else to step up as a high-level pass rusher. I think Gervon Dexter brings more of that to the table. I like Dexter a little bit more and his body and his athleticism more than I like Zach Pickens. So I'm gonna buy into it and say, hey, there was a little bit that she showed at the end of last year. Year 2, this is the time to figure it out. Lions, Jameson Williams, kind of hinted at this a couple times. He was one of those tier 1 receivers for me a few years back. Him, Drake, and Garrett Wilson. But this needs to be the year for Williams, right? Like with Reynolds gone. I mean, Amon-Ra is the focal point of that offense for sure, but he's an underneath intermediate threat with solid yak skills. Jameson brings that over the top element that just Amon-Ra's not. But I also liked him a ton coming out of Bama because he was more than that, right? Like he was a guy that ran a mean comeback, and there have been some clips of that on Twitter where the comeback route's gnarly, but then he drops it. So just clean up those drops, and then those plays turn into catches that turn into more confidence, turn into better stat, all that stuff. But also he's like a dude that, because you respect the speed, him on a slant is lethal. Because you have to play him off, but then he catches a slant, and him with the ball in his hands is a threat to take it anywhere to the house at any time. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. What do you do against Jameson Williams? It's just, also the suspension didn't help. I think that was his rookie year, so a lot of things have been kind of working against Jameson Williams. And I think the Lions have purposefully taken it slow. There was no need to rush him into a receiver 1 role because you had Amon-Ra, you had Josh Reynolds, you had Khalif Raymond. Now's the time for him to take that step forward. Year 3, put up or shut up time. Let's go see it. And I think this is the time. I think he's ready to. And then another year in that Ben Johnson offense. I think, and Ben Johnson's one of the best OCs in football. I think he understands too. Hey, Jameson brings something to the table that not many guys across the league do with his speed, but on top of that, pretty solid, nuanced route running. We need to maximize him now. So I'm hoping Ben Johnson can do that, and I'm hoping Jameson Williams, stays on the field and can take that step forward. Packers, Jaden Reed. I'm not entirely sure he's not their best receiver. I like Christian Watson. I think there's a lot of talent there, but not to sound like a grandpa here, but the best ability is availability. But even that aside, with what Jaden Reed showed me last year, like I wasn't crazy about them taking him in the second round. That felt a round early for me. But then I saw him last year, and I was like, damn, I like him more than Dobbs, and I like Dobbs a ton coming out of Nevada. I think Jaden Reed's their most talented receiver. And I stand by it. I'm willing to go into that going into the season. We'll see if Watson stays healthy. Hopefully he proves me wrong. I'd really love to see that. But man, I think Jordan Love, him and Reed are just going to build upon that chemistry. I think we saw LaFleur do a great job scheming him up. I think only going to double down on that going into year 2. And I'm hoping Reed is just that much better. He is a slot only guy, but I think the NFL, 3 receiver sets, slots are becoming a big part of it. Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, et cetera, et cetera. I think Jaden Reed could honestly, especially depending on Watson's injuries, Reed could pretty comfortably become the focal point of this offense. And if so, like, really intrigued by that. I do want to throw one more receiver in the mix as an honorable mention. And I do want to throw Eric Stokes in here, too. Like, Eric Stokes could be, like, a breakout guy under Jeff Hafley's defense. Maybe this is the year he breaks out in year 3. But I also want to say Dontavian Wicks. If Watson deals with injuries, like, Wicks, simply put, is like a guy I'm drafting as, like, an under-the-radar guy. Like, I'm kind of handcuffing Christian Watson. I'm not drafting Christian Watson, but I will, like, draft his handcuff in Dontavian Wicks because if Watson goes down with a big injury and misses significant time, I don't think the Packers are going to hold back. I think Dontavian Wicks will just legitimately take that role, and they will continue to play that offense as is. I felt like last year they got a little hesitant with Wicks, and they were like, yeah, it's like they wanted him to be that clear Christian Watson replacement. And he's not nearly the athlete, but he can still play that role. And they just were a little hesitant to do that. I think this year it's just pedal to the metal, all go. If Watson's not there, Wicks, next man up. So I want to throw him in as an honorable mention. Definitely could be the year where we're like, oh shit, that's the guy. That's the big body threat that we should be talking about with the Packers because Watson can stay healthy. And the last thing to talk about here is with the Vikings, Cameron Bynum. I think he's been a solid player, especially as a true free safety playing over the top. Josh Metellus, Harrison Smith still there. Metellus thinks a really nice nickel. Thought about having him here. And Harrison Smith, we all kind of know what he is at this point. But I think going into year 2 of that Brian Flores defense, and now that the Vikings can legitimately just rush 4. Like last year, it was show 8 and either send 6 to 8 or drop 8 into coverage and only rush 3. This year, they can play it a lot more honest. Rush 4, drop 7. You they can have a typical nickel look and just play traditional nickel. Like it's kind of crazy that I'm having to say that, but that's just the Flores magic he had to work last year. And I think because of that, Cameron Bynum's going to be that much more benefit of it. Now, sometimes I think he did benefit from the confusion, especially early on when Flores started to do that because teams were confused and maybe rushing throws or just making bad decisions, not seeing him in defense or in coverage. And he gets some takeaways there. But I think year 2 with Flores, a more stable and a more true environment for success, especially on the back end because that pass rush has improved exponentially, specifically at edge. I think Cameron Bynum is going to continue where he left off. And again, maybe it's just kind of the Jermaine Johnson thing where normal fans are just a year behind. Because I think, again, a lot of people would say, yeah, Cam Bynum's a good player. But I just think maybe to your more wider NFL audience, they'd be like, who's that? And I think this is the year where maybe that changes. Also, last year of his rookie contract, kind of the same thing with Benjamin St-Juste. Sometimes that last year of a rookie deal, these guys just find another level and they go out there and they earn some big money by next free agency, and that could definitely be Cameron Bynum this year. But that's going to do it for my breakout candidates for all 32 teams video. We had, a few extra names to talk about in there. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Who's your favorite team, and who do you think is going to be the breakout star for your squad this season? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below, and I'm going to try to respond to every comment that I possibly can. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hit that like button if you did. Subscribe if you're new to the channel and want more football content in your life, because we got plenty more coming on the horizon. But hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.